this is a video from the Angry Photographer. This is part 2 of top Nikon DSLR recommendations from the low end to the high end. And now let's take a look at the $2,000 to $6,000 range. Let's start at the top and speaking about the Nikon D4 and D4S. At $6,000, not only is it a known fact that at some time later this year or the beginning of next year, the Nikon D6 or whatever nomenclature they will apply to it will be out. The Nikon, both the D4 and D4S, are incredibly outdated. They are superior in one concern at their $6,000 rate, that is low light capability, and their extremely high buffer. But we're talking about $6,000. They are incredibly dated, both in their autofocus system and for what they are. I mean, even if you were to tell me, you were to come up to me and say, here's $10,000, okay, free of charge, you got to walk into that camera store and you got to blow it all. You know, you got to get one camera and a pile of lenses. You know, you got to get the best bang for your buck. I don't care what lenses you buy. Even with $10,000 free, I would not walk into that camera store and even dare think of purchasing. Even though I've used the Nikon D4S. I sold off my D3 that I had for quite a while. I would not purchase a Nikon D4 or D4S. For all that free money. It's just not feasible. It's outdated. It's not worth the money. Now, if you're someone that needs it for sports photography or some other action photography, and you can't wait for the Nikon D5 to come out, then obviously it's no big deal. It's a tax write-off, or if you have unlimited funds. Even if you had unlimited funds, I mean, it's the difference between penny wise and pound foolish. Even some of the people that I know that have millions of dollars, I mean many millions of dollars, they would never dare make a bad choice like that if they had an informed decision. But typically sometimes they'll go, well, I have a lot of money, so what's the most expensive camera you got? And the person pulls off the D4S because that's the biggest commission and that's the most expensive camera, and they're happy with it, for obviously so, but they could have gotten a better camera. So the point being is that in the $2,000 to $6,000 range, Nikon's current best DSLR, of course, is unquestionably the D810, my favorite DSLR, but that is irrelevant. I'm making an objective set of videos here for you, regardless of whatever my personal likes or dislikes are. Now, one of the wonderful things the Nikon D810 has, as well as the Nikon D750, is a stealth shutter. And some people don't take that into consideration, but having shot for so many years, there's nothing worse than, being in a crowd and you can actually hear behind you the shutter ch-clunk, 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 ch-clunk. The Nikon D18 has a wonderful stealth shutter. I mean, it's absolutely dreamy. But aside from that, it being my favorite camera, it is a $3,000 camera, and I cannot recommend it per se unless you have set aside, either as a tax write-off or within your budget, to spend between $2,000 to $6,000 on your DSLR body only, in which case I would definitely say between the $2,000 to $6,000 range, the Nikon D810 is a top choice. I won't even talk about the Nikon DF here. That camera is the bozo clown of the Nikon world. I mean, it is absolutely abysmal. It's the retarded stepchild. They could have done so much better on the Nikon DF. It's insanely expensive. It's absurd. It's clunky. It's obnoxious. It doesn't do what it was designed to do, and that's pretty much all to say about the Nikon DF. It's a no-go camera, and regardless of whatever funds you may or may not have, I don't care what you think it looks like, it's off limits as far as making any sort of logical, objective or even subjective decision on purchasing the Nikon DF. Now, as I stated before in video 1, I cannot under any circumstances at this current moment, given the prices of all Nikon DSLRs, make any recommendation, new or used, on the purchase of the Nikon D800, D800E, D600, D610. For the same amount of money or less, you can get a far superior camera. That being the case, the prices and the availability of the Nikon D7100 and the D750 have changed the game. Like I said, within that $600 to $1,000 range, the Nikon D7100 remains supreme. The D7200, as I told you in the prior video, should be called the D7100 SL, S for sports and L for low light. It is the D7200, as others have confirmed. If you want the links, let me know. Have confirmed, as well as I confirmed yesterday, the D7200 is a low light loser in its dynamic range. Now, in portraiture and in street photography and countless other areas, especially macro work, there's so many areas, low light detail is so incredibly important. If I'm actually going to take the shot in post and Photoshop and crank it up 3, 4, 5 stops, that becomes insanely vital, and in that case the D7200 is a loser. But Nikon does not have, a multi-million-dollar team of idiots. The D7200 was designed for exactly what Nikon was asked to fulfill. That was a high ISO performer and a larger buffer, and that's exactly what they did. The D7100 can be had at its current lowest price, and I say lowest, okay, the D7200 can be had at its lowest price of $930 to $950. All the prices that I'm telling you here are not full-blown retail at Best Buy or B&H. They are gray market, lowest available price. Gray market is not an issue. If it's an issue for you, that's understandable. However, the subjective references or the objective references, which is the premise of these videos, do not change. They remain absolutely the same, whether it's gray market price or otherwise. D7200 prices drop drastically, so in the $6,000 to $1,000 range, which the D7200 does not exist at full-blown retail. I still cannot recommend it at any price. Full-blown retail or gray market cannot recommend the Nikon D7200 unless, as I said, you are a sports high ISO action shooter, in which case I can recommend it. But what Nikon should have done is advertise the D7200 as a narrow spectrum 7100 with a Sony sensor with improved high ISO sensitivity and much improved buffer, which is exactly what it is. Now, it also does have much larger lettering. Some people have complained about the small, insignificant lettering on the front and top screen of the 7100, so that's been improved. I like it, but it's no big deal to most people. Some people with bad eyesight, love it a whole lot, so as an objective choice, it is a good decision to purchase that. So, going back again, to make things really clear, it is impossible for me to recommend to anybody, regardless of what their budget is, an Nikon D3200 or 3300, respectively $260 to $340, because for a mere $100 more between the 3200 and the 5200, it is a much wiser choice for you to hold out for another week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and purchase a 5200. However, as is the case in the $300 to $500 range, undoubtedly, the Nikon D5300 is king at $460. Cannot recommend at all. Now, while it is a good camera, and I have used Sam, I cannot recommend at all the Nikon D5500 for $600, because for an additional $100 more, the purchase of a new or factory refurb or gray market 7100 is a far, far, far superior choice. Also, when taking into consideration, you need to understand that Nikon D3000 and D5000 series are the most expensive Nikon cameras. Well, what does that mean? They're the cheapest cameras. They are the cheapest, but they do not have the ability to easily use manual focus lenses. There is no metering for same, and there is a titanic pile of extremely cheap AI and AIS Nikon lenses, and they also do not have an internal focus motor for driving that huge, insane plethora of wonderful and expensive D-series lenses, which makes the Nikon D3000 and 5000 series ultimately more expensive objectively. And this is a consideration people do not make, but they absolutely should. Well, it's great you saved a lot of money by buying a cheaper D3300 or 5200, but have you taken into consideration the fact that the real cost comes later in the purchase of glass? And people don't do that, and that's just short-sighted thinking, but everybody's kind of guilty of it. That's no big deal. But it needs to be pointed out so you can make a logical choice and decision. Now, once again, over the $600 to $1,000 range, the D7100 you can grab all day for $700. Here's another one right here. and the D700, which is my favorite. It's a full-frame sensor. It's an old tank, used to be a $3,000 camera. For $700, while I cannot necessarily, in some people's cases, if they tell me what their needs and wants are, I can say this is an excellent first purchase camera. I can, however, say if someone already has one of these, they want to know is, well, I need a backup camera, what's the best bang for the buck as a secondary camera? And here it is right here, unquestionably. All subjectivity aside, it is the D700. It is a tank, a beast. It is just a wonderful piece of artwork. It is supreme, sublime, divine. It is silk, sex, and sugar. And there's just nothing else to be said about it. And that is being objective rather than subjective. And that's $700 also. Like I said, D600, D610, D800, D800E cannot be recommended due to the fact that the Nikon D750 has both A, been fixed, and can be had for $1,500 to $1,600. Actually, the last I checked was average was $1,620, and that is the best purchase in the $1,200 to $2,000 range, which makes good used D800s, D800Es obsolete as far as consideration. So, technology changes, prices change. This is a transitional period in Nikon's product line and pricing, and I waited until I had a full hands-on review of the D70-200 in my hands to actually make this two-part video, and I'm going to be reviewing it on hands-on here in the next week or two. But I can't recommend it unless the caveat is that you're a sports or action shooter, or you shoot a lot of club scenes and low-light stuff, which really doesn't comprise the most of what photographers do, either amateur or advanced amateur. That low ISO dynamic range is so incredibly important when especially pushing pictures in post, and the D70-200 in this arena fails. It just fails, and that, given with its price, I cannot recommend the D70-200 at all, given that specific caveat, unless it is for a sports or action shooter. That's the cheapest new price on D70-200 is $930. So in the $600 to $1,000 price range, we're talking the D7100. And now the D610 can be had used for $900. If you're looking between $600 to $1,000, I can recommend specifically, if you are within the $600 to $1,000 range, that you can snag a nice minty used D610 for $850, $900, $950. That is the only caveat and exception for the D600 series, is if you're within that $600 to $1,000 range. Like I said, between $1,200 to $2,000 range, it's the Nikon D750, period. There is nothing else. That leaves out the D800 and D800E, new or used, no way, no how. Both are excellent cameras. I've owned a D800. I'm not giving any subjective opinion on that. It's given the capability and what the D750 is. I cannot recommend the D800 or D800E. Now, in, like I said, the $2,000 to $6,000 range, we are talking the D810, nothing else. But can I recommend that to most people? No. If it's within your budget, yes, or it's a tax write-off, most certainly so. Cannot recommend under any circumstances, unless it's an absolute necessity for its buffer speed and its low light performance, recommend the Nikon D4 or D4S, and never would I recommend the Nikon DF to anybody at any price, regardless of what their budget is. So this is a two-part series ending on Nikon recommendations. This video series will have to be updated from time to time as price and availability changes. Therefore, too, so does recommendation as far as getting what is the best for your money. Remember, I cannot recommend that any circumstance the purchase of the D3200 or D3300. And remember, the D3000 series and D5000 series, even though the top recommendation for your money is the D5300 or the D5200, you must take into consideration that those do not have the ability to meter older AI and AIS lenses, nor do they have the ability to autofocus screw drive D-series lenses. So that is an important consideration that most people do not make, and you need to make. If you like this video series, you always drop me a donation, and this is another video from the Angry Photographer. And happy hunting. Send me any questions you like, okay? I like to help people.